at 4 p.m. Now stay tuned for Behind the News Long Island. And once again, WBAI New York, 99.5 FM, and WBAI.org on the web. It's 5 p.m.
The worst type of crying is the silent one. The one when everyone is asleep. The one where you feel it in your throat and your eyes become blurry from the tears. The one where you just want to scream. The one where you have to hold your breath and grab your stomach to keep quiet. The one where you can't breathe anymore. The one when you realize the person that meant the most to you is gone. This is Behind the News Long Island. It's time.
Check. Hey, yo, it's time. Hey, yo, it's time. It's time. Hey, yo, it's time. We interrupt your programming to bring it to you live from the front lines. Strong animated gangs fleeing one time. Police is brutal like the streets is. Let my speech increase the peace through your speakers. Beat our weakness, of course, is division. Caused by religion, race, poor, be in prison way more than the rich ones. The laws of the pawns for position. My flow expose flaws in the system. Look, you can't afford to be a bystander. Behind the news where the lies die, we strive for high standards. The real power's in the hands of the people. Politics, propaganda, it's all see-through. And that's word that serves, the time is now. For the youth in our roots, gotta stand our ground. Listen Tuesdays at 5. Tune in to 99.5 East Ways. Reporting live behind the news. Your radio will break from the norm as we advocate for change and reform. Behind the news, unifying while exposing the counterfeits. It's the new voice of empowerment. Behind the new platform for the people it serves, where the truth in your speakers emerge. Behind the news, where politics meet their limitations, you get the real, never imitation. Behind the news, it's time. It's time. It's time.
Buenas noches, familia. Good evening, family. How's everybody doing out there in the great state of New York and the Northeast region? This is Sergio Argueta, Serge from Behind the News Long Island. Tonight is Tuesday night, the last day in March. Hard to believe that Women's History Month and Social Work Month is already drawing to a close. But as promised, this month was very special to us for a number of reasons. One being that we were looking at a number of issues as they pertain to our sistren, our sisters that are in the struggle. We talked about their history, their plight, and different challenges that they're facing. Tonight, we're continuing with the dialogue. Tonight's discussion is going to be focused on suicide, particularly teen suicide, with a specific concentration, if you will, on the Latina experience. And I have two outstanding panelists that are going to be sharing some wisdom and imparting some knowledge on all of us, really, getting us to understand, what this issue is all about. As we had promised, we were going to be delivering this specific content. We're going to continue doing this throughout our programming. So just because, Women's History Month or Her Story Month is coming to an end doesn't mean we're not going to talk about these issues. I've received a number of emails, a lot of posts and things of that nature. We're very happy that people are tuning in and like the quality of the programming and, the issues that we're talking about. That's what WBAI is all about, bringing you, a discussion on issues that no one else is talking about, that uninterrupted, unfiltered, non-commercial, tough talk, right? That's how we refer to it here. Brother Reggie holding it down behind the boards, making sure that we're able to get this information to you. So we're going to continue to do that day in and day out. Please make sure you follow us on Facebook via Behind the News LI. Hashtag. You could also look us up through Strong Surge, STRONG SERG. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. We're trying to get the word out by any means necessary. Tonight, we're going to be discussing self-harm and suicide, as I mentioned previously. Most importantly, we're going to talk about what we can do to engage our young people and help keep them safe and provide words of encouragement to families that are dealing with this struggle. But before we transition into tonight's discussion, let's go to Linda Perry for some news updates.
Good evening. For WBAI News in New York, I'm Linda Perry. Remains were found for two of the people missing from Thursday's gas explosion on the Lower East Side. A vigil was held for them last night. Investigations continue into causes of the explosion. One of the contractors, Dilbert Kukic, has been under investigation by the Manhattan DA's office. This for bribery and for circumventing normal channels to get locations certified for inspection. Fire Commissioner Daniel Nigro says once more debris has been cleared, they will be able to investigate the mechanics of what happened. The gas line to the sushi restaurant where the initial explosion occurred had been illegally tapped. Untrained schemers rigging up pipes to save money by siphoning natural gas is a recurring problem. Inspectors from Con Ed visited the building about an hour before the explosion. They determined work to upgrade gas service didn't pass inspection. They locked the line to ensure it wouldn't be used, and then they left. The investigation continues. New York State lawmakers are voting on a $142 billion budget proposal. It includes new money for schools, an additional $1.4 billion, and new ethics disclosure rules for lawmakers. This after former Speaker Sheldon Silver was charged with bribery and corruption. Watchdog groups say the reforms don't go far enough, that there are too many loopholes. There's also a big tax cut for yacht owners. Missing from the budget, the DREAM Act, which would extend financial aid to students in the country illegally, and minimum wage increases sought by Democrats. The fast food workers campaign is expanding. Labor organizers say it has morphed into a low-wage worker movement. It's now shifting into a social movement with the involvement of Black Lives Matter groups. Today, organizers announced that there will be a day of action on 170 college campuses, also in the streets across the country, with more than 2,000 groups participating. They include Jobs with Justice and the Center for Popular Democracy. The push for unionization and $15 an hour is set for April 15th. Governor Andrew Cuomo has banned non-essential state-funded travel to Indiana. This after the state adopted a religious freedom law that critics say opens the door to discrimination against the LGBT community. And finally, family members and supporters of Mumia Abu-Jamal say the former death row inmate was rushed to a Pennsylvania hospital to be treated for complications from diabetes. Abu-Jamal's wife, brother, and lawyers spoke Tuesday outside Schuylkill Medical Center in Pottsville. That's where he was taken Monday for treatment. They say his blood sugar was dangerously high and he could have slipped into a diabetic coma. Go to prisonradio.org for more information. Linda Perry, WBAI News, New York.
Welcome back to Behind the News Long Island. That was REM's Everybody Hurts. And, that we've decided to use that word, that song, those words, thanks to Reggie who looked that up. And it just ties in nicely with the issues that we're going to be discussing, right? Everybody hurts. In a number of ways, when we think about being hurt or hurting people or violence, in America, we're quick to talk about these issues, and they're framed in such a way where we're afraid someone else will physically hurt us. We're afraid that someone else will physically hurt our loved ones. And seldom, if ever, do we take time out to speak about self-harm, self-hurt, that desperation that so many individuals out there feel. Unfortunately, in the U.S., self-inflicted violence is something very real. Suicidal ideation and suicide are leading causes of injury of death for so many among us. Close to 38,000 people die by suicide each year in the U.S., and that's more than people that are killed, more than our homicide rate. Year after year, it's among the top 3 leading causes of death for young people, ages 15 to 24. And there are countless of families that are forced to grapple with the issue and its devastating realities. Tonight, we're going to be talking about suicide among our youth, with a particular focus on females and specificity really lent to the issue of Latinas. While it's true that males commit suicide at higher levels than females, it's important for us to acknowledge that females are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than boys, and it's therefore important for all of us to understand why it is that our young ladies are dealing with so much despair and dealing with so many challenges in their lives. The Latino community has among the lowest suicide rates in terms of ethnic groups, but unfortunately, Latinas are more likely to attempt suicide. Today, joining me here in studio, both my brother and sister trekked it out from Long Island. We have brother Brett Scudder. Mr. Scudder is a public and inspirational speaker and a suicide attempt survivor himself. Through his personal life challenges and struggles, He's created a grassroots effort in attempting to bring forth information to communities in need focused on emotional wellness. His goal is to bring awareness to people in communities, and he's really focusing on a ground level approach. He wants to hit the streets and get this to individuals that aren't necessarily walking in to mental health clinics. His perspective is quite unique, and the grassroots effort that he's implementing is quite unique. We also have in studio Regina Barros Rivera, LCSW. She serves as the Associate Executive Director of North Shore Child and Family Guidance. She's a bilingual, bicultural social worker, and she works with children, youth, and their families who have been impacted by psychosocial stressors such as poverty, drugs, alcohol, mental illness, trauma. And her focus now is specific to undocumented migrant populations. Her most recent program edition, which we'll be discussing today, is the Latina Girls Project, a program created to respond to the alarming rate of attempted suicides by young Latinas. Thank you both so much for being here. Brett, we'll jump right into this with you. When we talk about suicidal ideation and attempts and going through the struggles, we're talking about a number of complex factors that impact communities of color quite differently, I would say. Communities from different cultures quite differently. Can you give us some insight as to that struggle?
Well, thank you, Serge, for bringing this topic to the forefront. This is a very serious issue on a number of levels because, again, in our minority communities, we don't look at the fact that we struggle so much within ourselves that it causes hurt and pain in ourselves. If we're not falling down on the ground bleeding or hemorrhaging in some kind of physical way that we see it, we don't think of the emotional distress causing physical pain and the hurt that we go through. In our minority communities, one of the things that we see is that tough love where we talk to our children about, man up, and talk to our girls about learning to take it and just deal with it like a man, and the girls, we got to grow up like a woman. But at the end of the day, we find more of our youth today being more emotional. They really have so much going on. They don't have any life skills or coping skills to deal with a lot of the challenges. And so it's not just about getting support from the home anymore. They're looking for support in the community, and they're not getting it. Because the community itself is putting a lot of pressure on our youth. They have to fit in. They have to abide by certain guidelines. They have to go to school, shut down that emotional side to learn the academia side. But at the end of the day, what we really find is that most of our youth are struggling with real issues, most of it coming out of the home. They want love and they need to be loved, and they're not getting it. A lot of parents don't see it. A lot of parents say, when I was growing up, I didn't have what you have, but I'm giving you this, that. You have everything that you need. But the truth is a lot of our kids don't have that emotional connection and that love that they truly need. And that's what's killing most of our children today. Substance abuse issues have increased. The suicide attempts have increased. The cutting has increased tremendously. And a lot of parents are not aware of it because they're not seeing the areas where the youth are cutting themselves because they have become so good at how they hurt themselves because they don't want to be seen to draw the attention to them. So it's a lot of emotional issues that we're dealing with in our communities, that the stigma of people saying you're crazy or there's something wrong with you or you have some kind of illness is preventing a lot of people from getting the help. And so we have to do more education and awareness that mental health is different from mental illness. And if we can do early intervention for a lot of our students, youth, community, and parents, because we got to educate the parents. We got to educate the parents to help the youth.
Absolutely. When Regina, we were talking before we went live, and a lot of our discussions had to do with exactly what Brother Brett just mentioned, this idea that adults kind of look at where our young people are. And I'm thinking about the adolescents that I work with currently and in the past. And it's always, oh my God, you don't know how good you have it, right? And if you've come from another country and you're now in the United States of America, land of opportunity, home of the brave, where you can achieve whatever you want, oh my God, you have no idea how good you have it. And then these children are walking into schools every day where they're dealing with the mural that Brother Brett just painted with all these different stressors. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing in terms of grappling with this issue and educating our parents on this issue?
With the young teens that come to our center are usually referred by school, or they may be referred by the emergency room after they've made a suicidal attempt. And the trend that we see is that they're usually in a major conflict with their parent, and significantly the mom. Daughters need their mothers. You need to be able to have that relationship. They need to have good communication. They look to their mothers as role models. But today, and I'm talking about the immigrant mom, is very different from the young girl. The words that she's hearing in school of what you should be like is very different from the mom at home. So she's torn between two worlds, and she's struggling, and she doesn't have that outlet. She doesn't have the words. She's not allowed to use the words, and really feels like there's no hope. So when they've made a gesture, that they've made an attempt, because some have made very serious attempts close to death, it's that they gave up. In that moment, they felt like there's really no way out. And what we want to do is help them to see there is a way out. There's lots of ways out. There's lots of doors that could open, and that they are very lucky that their parents, and I help them to see that, brings them to us. We're a mental health agency on Long Island.
Brother Brett, when we talk about the numbers and how alarming they are, close to 5,000, young people that take their lives are ages 15 to 24. And oftentimes they're getting this messaging, and they hear how great life is. And, I'm thinking about even the attacks of September 11th, and, we lost 3,000 people. And, not that we're going to minimize that and the impact it had on us, but when we lose more young people to self-inflicted injury, what does that say about us as a nation, and why is it impacting our young people so much?
Well, Serge, let me bring one thing into the conversation, which is very important. The numbers that you're seeing that are reported do not mirror the realities of the numbers that are in our society, in our communities. What we find is we go into schools, we go into community centers, we go into churches. We actually engage with people on a home level. We take our services to the home because, again, we see the problems on a different level. But Serge, the truth is that number is far off the reality of the real numbers of what's happening in our community. And that's the scary part. The scary part is that we have more families who are afraid of letting people know that their child has attempted, their child is having some kind of mental illness, as how they say it's mental illness. But they're not looking at the fact that the child is going through emotional challenges that the child needs help and guidance through, but because they don't know how to handle that, the parent themselves don't know how to handle that, and so they're not getting that support. So what happens now is we have a lot of our youth who are in crisis and distress and are not saying anything. They're not going to the emergency room. They're not being taken to the emergency room. They're not being taken into traditional centers. So when we get a call, we usually hear, is the service private? Is it confidential? Are you going to report that we have called to talk about this? And the truth is, when we say no, that's when we get the invite to come in the home and meet with the family. Then you see the reality of a lot of what these families are going through and the struggles. Even in the schools, we get a lot of calls from schools where we have to be providing services in the schools. We have emotional wellness support groups in schools for students who are dealing with so much issues that even their parents say, oh, they don't need that service. They don't need any counseling. They don't need any help. So the child cannot stay after school to go to an after-school program. So what we have to do is we work with the administration. Administration creates a time within the child's schedule within the school for us to work with the child. So it's a lot of things that are happening in terms of the self-harm and the self-injury. And when you look at Latina females, what's the one thing you hear these young men talk about? Oh, my God, they're so beautiful. They're so beautiful. They get so wrapped up in just the beauty of Latina females, and they're idolized. I want to have a Latina female as a girlfriend. And so they crave after these young women. And then these women come under so much pressure. They're pressured at home, they're pressured at school, they're pressured in relationships. So much pressure on every level, but not enough support to help them understand how to really control and cope with all of this.
And I think that's a great segue, right? What Regina, what are the biological or sociocultural issues tied with Latina suicide rates?
Well, when I'm glad that you raised that about we find that sexuality is one of the pressures that the girls feel, the Latina girls, and we see that's a big difference in how the family handles their coming of age, where up until maybe age 11 or 12, a large number of the girls were doing fine. They were doing well in school. They had friends. They were doing their chores. They were following the rules. Then all of a sudden, they're turning into these beautiful, quote, sexual beings, and the parents want to shut it down. It's like, you are not going to have sex until you get married. You won't have a boyfriend nor sex until you get married. And then the girls will promise, like, oh, yeah, and, that's not true. So we do a lot of work with the parents and parenting around, you're in a different culture, the expectations are different. We're not telling you to give your daughter permission to do the following. We're saying to you is, let your daughter learn to protect herself. Let her learn how to make good choices for herself. Let her have that voice. And that doesn't come overnight. It comes with a lot of work with the parents because it is very different for them, for the parents.
Well, what we're talking about is empowering parents.
Yes.
And make sure that they provide that stability and that ability for these young women to be able to say no and stand up for themselves and feel that they have their own voice and that they need to exercise that voice. Brett, coming back to you, I'm hearing Regina, lay out the issues in terms of sexuality. And previous to that, you were talking about this sort of this challenge that we face in communities of color, in particular, in terms of, a lot of it is social cultural, in that, el problema que pasa aquí se queda aquí. What happens here stays here. Like, you never bring these issues, right? We've met with parents in different settings where we're providing services, and for the first 30, 40 minutes, it's really trying to get them to understand that you don't work for a government agency, that you're not there to report, that you're actually there to help. Can you talk about the importance of being culturally competent and really, in terms of not meeting the client where they are, not only in terms of counseling, but out in the streets,
yes.
out in the schools, going out to the churches where the community is and saying, let's talk about this issue, let's talk about this challenge?
It's a very big piece when you look at how we're going to break this whole emotional wellness piece. In terms of, we have to take it to a ground level by going into communities and having this conversation. When you hear a mom talk about how growing up, these are some of the things she had to endure, and now she's raising a daughter that's coming to age, and she's telling the daughter, well, if I went through that, you got to go through the same thing too. If I made it, you can make it too. But not understanding that over time, things have changed so much that we live in a different socioeconomic time. We live in a different culture. We live in a time where sex and that whole picture that is so painted of beauty is puts Latinas at the top of the list. And so for them, mothers doesn't know how to broach that conversation. I'll give you an example. We have a young lady right now whose mother is so protective of her. She can't even breathe anything out of a schedule that she has. And her mother is so fearful of her getting in a relationship that she is in a relationship and the mother doesn't know. And because she's in the relationship, she's trying to please the boy, fear the mother, and now trying to keep her grade levels up. And it's not going well. But the mother doesn't know what's going on. So the mother wants her to get treatment, thinking that she's having a mental illness, a breakdown. So when we go into communities and we have conversations and do workshops, we talk about the realities of these issues, difference between mental illness and mental health, the way in which you, as a parent, you have to look at the dynamics of social media, the bullying pieces, the way in which a lot of our kids now are leaning towards technology, texting, sexting, these mobile devices, and how, as a parent, how do you have the conversation? That's the one thing that we really got to do, is teach parents how to have a conversation with your child, because the first time a child opens up to a parent to say, hey, mom, hey, dad, I want to talk with you about something, if that parent does not respond in the right way for that first time, that child shuts down. A child will never feel comfortable again open up to that parent. So what the child goes outside and tries to find support outside. And that sometimes creates more problems than it does good. So there's a lot of cultural pieces that we have to get the parents in, because the parent has to support the child. The child is looking for guidance and leadership from the parent. But the parent, are so busy working multiple jobs. Some parents are so busy working, they hardly see their children. Child goes to school when they're gone to work, and when they come home, the child is sleeping. So there isn't a lot of family culture anymore. And these are some of the challenges in our minority communities, that kids are raising themselves. They don't have that family structure where if mom is not available, grandma is available, or aunt is available. It's that, as you said, what stays here, what happens here stays here, and a single family environment is creating a lot of the biggest problems in our country.
You know, when we've had a number of shows now, and there's a couple of things that clearly keep coming up, and a lot of it has to do with class and resources. You know, and it's not that we want to say everything is related to class, but when we talk about the extended family, when we talk about the role that it played, when we talked about sort of this communal sense of well-being and wellness that existed in terms of everyone knowing each other and sort of taking ownership in the raising of all children, right? And making sure that we're providing for all children, that's sort of gone away. Regina, what are some of the things we need to do in terms of engaging our parents? How do we tackle that issue? You know, I'm thinking about, you know, a recent Latino male immigrant coming here and, you know, sending for his partner and sending for his daughters, and now his daughter's coming here and having to deal with with this new world, and me saying, oh, absolutely not, I don't want you out there. I don't, you know, so there's some real factors there that parents are taking into consideration. But how do we sort of educate those parents in terms of saying, look, these are the facts, and we need to get you this info?
It's interesting because hearing you talk about the extended family and the expectation for the child, many of our girls have had it. They don't want that. They want to be with their peers. They want to go out after school. They want to do other things. The quote normal adolescent development includes having your friends, having your own ideas, going out, having a good time, going to a party, going to sleepovers. My parents said, sleepover? No way. They, you know, in our agency we have houses. It's North Shore Child Guidance has different houses. We're talking about having a sleepover in one of the houses as a fun thing because that's not heard of. You're not sleeping in anyone's house because it means you're going to be sleeping with some boy, blah, 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 and that we just won't have it. And the other is they feel suffocated. They don't want to hear about tia and uncle and the extended family and everybody in their church is their cousin. Enough. You know, it's like, please let me live, let me breathe. They will tell you that. I'm not saying it's also, you know, the flip side of it is they learn that it's wonderful, and you learn as a Latina who I am to embrace it as you get older. But for that developmental time, it's like, please give me a break. So it's a balance. It's working with the families, letting them know when to back off a little bit. Like when, you know, we were talking about the project that we developed, we have bilingual, bicultural staff. And we said, well, what do you think these girls need? And we said, well, they need the clinical. We have the individual, the family, the clinical. If they need psychiatric, if they need medication, we'll do all that. If they need a hospital, we'll do that. But you know what they need? They need a life. They need a life outside of the one they have, but a protected one. So when they want to go outside, that the parent doesn't say to me, what are you, crazy? She's going to go to the corner. She's going to get kidnapped. I'll say, she really going to get kidnapped? Well, maybe. Maybe there was one that was kidnapped 10 years ago, but that meant they're all going to be. So anyway, what I say is we developed a program where they will go out on the weekends and it'll be a protected environment, and then we'll have clinicians go out with them, and then, you know what, you could see the world. There's art, there's music, there's theater. There's a world outside the doors that you think are just closing for you.
Can I just piggyback on that? Because you talked about needing a life, and that's one of the key things. There's so many of our kids are living the lives of their parents. They're living somebody else's life.
Yes.
They are so...
Or their peers, right? Or attempting to live the life of their peers, or, you know, the individuals that they see on television, reality stars, all these individuals, yes?
They want out. They want out of the monotony of having to go from school, because forget the after-school program.
Right.
Go from school to home to maybe do chores and take care of the younger ones.
And see, a lot of the after-school programs don't cater to the emotional development of our youth. They
Right.
cater to academics and giving them playtime and
Yes.
stuff, but that emotional piece is not there. But Serge, you said something about the fact that we don't have that extended community, that extended family piece anymore. We do. We truly do. But it doesn't address the emotional issues. You'll see the child, the family, uncle, cousin, niece, nephew, everybody's together, but no one wants to talk about how they're feeling and the emotional piece that they're going through. So now you have one person in the family who's having an emotional breakdown and would not take up the phone to call the uncle, aunt, niece, or cousin to say, I'm going through this. So there is that extended family.
But it's that closeness, right? That closeness is gone. And I mean, I certainly understand young people wanting to get out there and live their lives. I get to hear that, much more than the parental side. So I'm here in terms of like framing the issue the way the parent sees it. But it's striking that balance. It's trying to find a way of, okay, I need to be, to let my child walk out of this house. I need to assist them in terms of some sort of regimen. And it's like, look, all right, go to the after school program, go to this, become an informed and involved parent. And when we're talking about the lack of the connectivity, right? Mm-hmm. They're connected to social media, and if a parent had their Facebook, connection to a kid, they probably know where the updates were, what this child is going through, more so than having an opportunity to say, you know what, let's sit down and talk about how your day was. Why? Not because a parent doesn't want to provide, but because they're out there struggling. Listen, it's hard to believe we're already at the halfway point. We're going to take a small little break. Brother Reggie's going to play a little bit of music for us, and we'll come right back and pick right up. That was Billie Holiday's Gloomy Sunday, and today we're talking about suicidal ideation, and self-harm. In 2011, 487,700 people were treated in emergency departments for self-inflicted injuries. Non-fatal self-inflicted injuries resulted in an estimated $6.5 billion in combined medical and work loss costs. Tonight we're being joined by two activists and mental health specialists in their own right, out there making a difference, really engaging community and trying to empower our young people. We're being joined by Brother Brett Scudder and Regina Barros Rivera, both of them doing some outstanding work. During the break, we were talking about that, striking that balance, and we were talking about social institutions and the fact that everybody sort of wants to wipe their hands clean, and we always look for that easy fix it, or we want someone to blame, and oftentimes the person to blame is that parent that's abdicated responsibility, or this idea or perception that these parents are just not good parents. Can we talk about that, Regina? Any thoughts on that?
I think the parents are doing the best that they can. I have the parents come in, and we do engage the dads. They used to say, oh, you can't include the fathers, don't come in. These dads come in. And I have said they will come. When they come for the first time, when they hear somebody is there to help them with their child, they sob. And they will sob like they never did before. They never did in front of their family. The pain that they have of feeling like they've had the world on their shoulders, and here their little girl wants to die. They would give anything to have a smile on that little girl's face. So the idea of they're working 2 and 3 jobs. They're doing the best that they can. What can they do? And I always say it's a community. It's the community that has to come together. And I say to them, we're going to hold hands on this. We're going to be partners. It's going to be us as your clinician, the community, it's the school, it could be your church. It has to be other folks that help raise these girls and help them to see that, there's lots of paths that your little girl can take. I say little girls because they're between the ages of 12 and 17 that come to this program. But they can have a life that's going to be very different from the one that they feel, the only one that they feel that they have right now, which they feel as death as the viable option. And I want them to change that. That's our goal, to say, no, this is not going to be an option for you. There's going to be lots of options in life, and let's see how we could help you get them.
When we talk about, socialization, particularly around issues of gender, and we talk about the patriarch, right, this idea that males aren't supposed to show, a sensitivity. And truth be told, even, in terms of our discussion, Regina, as a father, I know the role that my wife plays within our family unit, my partner plays, right? And I could tell you that I'm going to push back a little here in terms of me really understanding the role that I play, particularly for my 2 my daughters, and Claire, one's going to be 5 months tomorrow, and the other one's 6 years old going on 16, ready to go to college already. But and so it's easy for me to kind of think about, I'm going to do it this way and I'm going to do it the other. But Brett, let me come back to you as a man, from one man of color to another man of color. What do we need to do in terms of socializing our males to sort of assist our young girls and empowering them to get to a place where they can navigate the difficulties of transitioning into adulthood?
It's interesting you asked that question, because one of the big things that we see in a lot of the at-risk young females is that need for their fathers' input in their lives. They really want to have the support of their fathers. But a lot of us as males, when we were growing up, we were told not to cry, not to show that emotional side. We're to go out there, do the best that we can, work as hard as we can, put food on the table, take care of the bills and all that, and then let mom handle the emotional side of all that. But what we're seeing is that a lot of the young girls are looking for that role from their dads. How do I engage with this young man? What should I look for in a man that I'm going to be with, and how should he be treating me? But it's such a broad issue, Serge, because again, here we are, you and I both fathers, we have kids, and we have to look within ourselves and see how the role that we play now versus when we were growing up has changed. And that's the reality of the fact that now it's about both parents, mom and dad, playing both roles in the life of a child. But you have a lot of us as males who can't get that. We can't wrap that around our head. So what we do, we have male support groups. We have workshops geared towards males, talking about emotional wellness and talking about raising a child and how do you engage with your child. If your child is going through certain type of issues, how do you broach a conversation? Because the truth of the matter is a lot of males, fathers, want to be more involved in their child's lives, but when the child starts talking about emotional issues, especially girls, start talking about relationships, the first thing we say is, oh, you're not ready for a relationship, you're not ready for boys, you're not ready for sex. The truth is most of them already are engaged, are involved in that. So now we have to do more support groups. We got to get together as men, really, and talk about our own issues as men, putting it out on the table, not being afraid of it. So uplift and inspire each other, because you may be going through something, but you don't know how to deal with it, but you're afraid to ask. Can you imagine if we all came together as men and we were just talking about raising our children? And you can say, hey, I've been there, I've done that, here's something that you can do. And I can say, well, here's something that you can do. But not try to play it down. And it really bothers me when I hear people talk about, oh, men are not standing up to their responsibility, men are not this, men are not that. That's not fair. Because this was not something through generations that was a male responsibility. Even addressing the emotional status and the emotional state that males are in. So now we have to change that paradigm, not only for our children, but also for ourselves. One, we need more male support groups. We have support this for women and females and mothers. We need more support for males, more program for males that revolves around parenting and emotional wellness, because we are broken in a lot of ways, coming out of a lot of the slavery mentality that many of us still have today. The physical chains were removed, but most of our males are still shackled in that whole mentality of slave movement, how, when, where. And we got to help them to break out of that, free the mind so that the whole being can move and can engage and can help our children grow and develop in the way they need to.
The trauma is definitely intergenerational. We know that what our great grandparents were dealing with, we're still dealing with today. It's just changed, right? Regina, you are working in terms of trying to break that chain, to interrupt that cycle. What are some of the things that we are seeing in terms of that intergenerational piece? Because we talked about it. A lot of them have experienced trauma. Mothers have experienced the same type of trauma, and then they don't know how to deal with it, and they have this pick yourself up by your bootstraps mentality that they're trying to pass on. Can you share with us, about that intergenerational sort of connection? But most importantly, what is the Latina Girls Project doing to break that?
Well, with the Latina girls that we see at our agency, the majority are from Central America and some from South America. So I always like to distinguish Latinas are different based on the country of origin and the country's, the history that comes, the economic exploitation, the violence. I talk about the legacy of violence that follows these girls.
Governmental violence?
Yes,
Right?
against the community. So you had their fathers who may have been at war, their brothers, their uncles who were killed, where their mothers witnessed incredible torture and violence. And the stories sometimes come out in the therapy, come out in the group therapies. We have multiple family groups where the mothers talk about it. So there was abuse and violence that these mothers experienced, and then underneath it, it gets the girls also experience the abuse here. And we have many girls that come in having been sexually abused from very young ages. So you wonder what is going on. Why is that being repeated? And how is our society going to help to protect those girls? So I always begin by beginning to talk about it, bringing it out in the open, and helping the girls to learn to protect themselves, and helping the moms to protect the girls, and to bring up that conversation and to have the conversation. In the other that we find in the, particularly with the girls talk about and the parents, that there's a double standard set for them and their brothers, where the brothers at a certain age are told you could go out, have a good time, date, be that good, quote, male lover. You know, you talk about the beautiful Latina woman, you also hear about the male, the great male lover, the Latin lover, right? So the boy goes out. So what we find that a lot of the boys come in through the door of the drug and alcohol. Well, they'll get in trouble because they start experimenting or doing substances as opposed to self-harming. And they'll self-harm in that way, right, as opposed to self-harming through the cutting, where the girls kind of go inward and maybe get depressed and isolate and self-harm to relieve the sadness and the pain. So not everyone's the same, so we always want to scratch away and try and figure out what's going on for that particular girl that comes before you. But you want to interrupt that repetition of the violence. You want to acknowledge it, speak to it, and break it.
And also to add to that too, it's important for us to get parents to understand, don't be ashamed or be afraid of just saying, hey, I went through this. As immigrants coming into this country, a lot of the process of getting here was very traumatizing. A lot of people coming here through different ways experienced a lot of trauma. But here's another thing that we in our minority communities don't understand. When you say the word trauma, we don't know what trauma really is, and we don't know what trauma means. So people look at trauma on the extensive events that happens where someone actually is really blood gushing or something really serious. But trauma affects many of us in simple, small ways that builds up because, again, we don't know how to deal with it. When you look at, we live in a society where grief and loss, we're not given the time to grieve, but many of us have experienced different traumatizing events that have created such things where, PTSD is among our children, and we're not even talking about the PTSD among our children because of the trauma they've gone through. So again, it comes back down to education and awareness. How do we educate our communities on basic life things that are happening and saying these are traumatizing events that can possibly traumatize you, because not everybody is affected not every event leaves a trauma. But if you are, here's how you should deal with it. Here's what you should do. Because on the flip side of that, the substance abuse piece also has an undertone of the PTSD. And the PTSD is very, very heavy and prevalent in our youth. And it's very scary. Because again, we are looking for specific things. We're looking for the behaviors that either end up in a shooting, a stabbing, or something, but we're not seeing that suicidal ideation and that suicide tendency of not wanting to live, not caring about life, not caring about myself. I'm not taking care of myself because I want to die. I'm not taking care of myself because I don't have a reason to live. The religious side of that, where many people will say, if I kill myself, then I'm going to hell. And it's the only reason why some people are still living today, because of that religious, that just,
That's a whole other 1 hour show, right? I mean, but there was so much in terms of the brilliance and the way both of you frame these issues, right? It's true. Not every traumatic experience leaves the remnants of trauma in an individual. And we know that, and that two individuals could go through the exact same trauma and they'll be able to overcome that trauma. And, it's for a number of different reasons as to why those two differentiate.
And that's,
Brett,
Sergio, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
And that's the reason why we try to get parents to understand that. It's very important that parents understand that, because you hear parents say to their children a lot, I went through the same thing that you went through.
Exactly.
And we want them to understand that even though you went through the same thing that your child is going through, you both have different impacts on that, different emotional impacts. It could be different across the board because where it happened. So it may be the same event, but just the impacts are different.
And just the supports that individuals had. And I think you talked about it in a nice way, where timelines and times have changed, and things that existed back then didn't exist now, and social institutions back then that existed that were powerful are not there now. And, I mean, there are just so many things that when you get into this, this historical discussion in terms of the strengths perspective or the resources that they had that kids today just don't have, it's an impossible, you're sort of comparing two different things. Brett, let's talk about the work that you are doing. I know that you have, some you're going into communities to do different types of workshops. Can you share a little bit about that?
Every 3 months, we do what we call a suicide awareness and prevention tour. Basically, when you see a tour, people go, what do you mean a tour? Like music artists, they go around the country doing tours. So we wrap the idea, again, trying to get people to be more receptive to the conversation about mental health, mental illness, and suicide. So every 3 months, we do a suicide awareness and prevention tour. We go into schools, churches, communities. We do workshops, luncheons, conferences, sit and learns, invite people to come out to learn. It's about empowering our communities for us to really sit as a community and talk about things that we may not even be aware of that's happening. When you have two neighbors living beside each other and one has a mental illness and the other one has just experienced a suicide attempt and they both don't know each other, but you're getting a call from both of them, you realize that we're not really connected as a loving and caring community. See, my thing is, I always say it takes a caring village to raise a child, because the same village can break that child and tear that child down. So it's the caring part that we're missing, right? So we need to build that care back in. So we do these tours. We go into communities, schools, churches, whoever wants to invite us in, because we put it out there. We're inviting you to allow us to come in.
And so for more information on that, where would our listeners go?
To our website, SISFI.org. And the information is on our website.
And we'll definitely be sure to post it on Facebook and share it with folks. Regina, you didn't get to tell me about the Latina Girls Project. You wanna share a little bit about that as the hour winds down?
Okay, well, the Latina Girls Project at North Church Island Family Guidance it includes our clinical services, which is under our Office of Mental Health licensing at our agency, where we offer the clinical services, but it also has the component of going out on the weekends. So we had a very generous donor who gave us funds to take the girls out. So we pick different places where we go. Once a month, we'll take them on an outing. We've taken them to the theater. We took them to the Repertorio Español. We took them to the regular American theater. We took them to Lincoln Center, to art, museum, dance. We've had them introduce them to art and painting, anything where you can touch them in some way so that they could see that there is hope out there, that there's a world out there. And our agency has a wilderness program, so we take them hiking. In the beginning, when I really pushed the hiking, they said they hated the hiking, but I tell them it's good for you, it's good for you. So maybe we don't have them hike as much, but we're starting to look at the hiking as also they need to go out and breathe and be out in the world.
Connect to Mother Nature.
Connect to Mother Nature, connect to the peers in a safe environment. Which is not with the parents. I'm like, okay, it's good you're with the parents, and the parents love having them in special social family events, but then this is also a safe place to go to be with the peers. So like I said, that the project includes what we call a fast track clinical referral. So if a school has a young person that they identified at risk for suicide, they can make a phone call. We will see them in 24 to 48 hours. And we have a bilingual staff that is bilingual and bicultural available to help them. They could do walk-in if they need to. So it's a service that's there for them based on the need. So I'm very proud to say that we have a board of directors that has supported this 110%.
Excellent. And you know what we're bringing to you on Behind the News Long Island today are two different perspectives that you know that you can tell on during this 1 hour. We've established common ground. You have an organization rich in history, that has been serving the Long Island region for 30 plus years. And then you also have, that grassroots brother that, has been through the struggle and is saying, you know what, I'm going to do something about this. Damn, anybody else trying to stand in my way. I think I'm allowed to say that word, right? All right, cool. Mario Murillo's listening right now. He just sent me a text, so I'm making sure I don't get fired. But what we're talking about is, there's a way where we can start working. We can both take these folks that are on the margin and meet somewhere towards the middle and recognize that together we can succeed. In a nutshell, what I've heard today is that, our children are our most valued possessions, right? And we need to instill in them and love them and care for them. It takes not only a caring village, but a loving village, an empathetic village, a resourceful village where all of us come together to sort of provide. That's what we do here. That's community, right? That's community radio. That's the information we've been bringing to you. And we wouldn't be able to do this if it wasn't for the people behind, the camera and behind the boards. And, so Brother Reggie Johnson, thank you for looking up those songs and contributing to our program, keeping us on. Brother Antonio Kelly from Picture This. And his YouTube channel. Please make sure you check him out. We'll get you that information too next week. As of right now, I got to tell you that for me, it's always an honor to be able to bring you this information. Remember, one voice, one mic, one community. It's not your community. It's not my community. It's our community. And if we don't take care of it, who will? Long Island stand up. Peace.
Hey, yo, it's time. Hey, yo, it's time. It's time. Hey, yo, it's time. We interrupt your programming and bring it to you live from the front lines. Strong animated gangs fleeing one time. Police is brutal like the streets is. Let my speech increase the peace through your speakers. Beat our weakness, of course, is division. Caused by religion, race, poor, be in prison way more than the rich ones. The laws of the pawns for position. My flow exposed flaws in the system. Look, you can't afford to be a bystander. Behind the news, where the lies die, we strive for high standards. The real power's in the hands of the people. Politics, propaganda, it's all see-through. And that's word that serves, the time is now. For the youth in our roots, gotta stand our ground. Listen Tuesdays at 5. Tune in to 99.5 East Ways, reporting live behind the news. Radio will break from the norm as we advocate for change and reform. Behind the news, unifying while exposing the counterfeits. It's the new voice of empowerment. Behind the new platform for the people it serves, where the truth in your speakers emerge. Behind the news, where politics meet their limitations, you get the real, never imitation. Behind the news, it's time. It's time. It's time.